Charles Whittaker was a man accustomed to command. At 55, the billionaire tech mogul had built an empire from scratch, revolutionizing industries with innovations that reshaped the world. But despite his extraordinary success, there was one part of his life that felt utterly out of control, a part that left him feeling powerless and alone. That part was Titan, his German shepherd. Titan had once been the perfect companion, loyal, calm, and fiercely protective. The dog had been a gift from Charles's late wife, Claire, a woman whose warmth and kindness had softened his hard edges and brought balance to his life. Claire had loved Titan deeply, spending hours training and playing with him in their sprawling estate's gardens. The three of them had been a tight-knit family, bound by love and trust. But everything changed 6 months ago, the day Claire died suddenly from a heart condition. The loss was devastating, shattering Charles's carefully constructed world. And in the months that followed, Titan changed too. The dog who had been his wife's shadow now seemed haunted, snarling at visitors, barking at shadows, and attacking anyone who came too close. Charles tried everything. Trainers, veterinarians, animal behaviorists from across the country. None could break through Titan's fierce anger. The dog bit 3 people in the process, leaving deep marks and shattered confidence. Most experts recommended euthanasia, but Charles refused. "He's not just a dog," Charles insisted. "He's family." To keep everyone safe, Charles commissioned a state-of-the-art enclosure, a large glass room inside the mansion, soundproofed and climate-controlled. Titan was confined there, visible but untouchable. The once joyful dog now paced restlessly behind the thick glass, snarling at anyone who approached. The house grew quiet, the laughter and warmth replaced by silence and tension. Word spread in the city about the billionaire's untouchable dog. The media dubbed Titan the dangerous beast in the glass cage, spinning stories of Charles's heartbreak and isolation. Reporters speculated about the tragic man and his savage dog, painting a picture of wealth and loneliness intertwined. But Charles had one final idea, born of desperation and hope. He made a public announcement. "I am offering $1 million to anyone who can calm Titan. No tricks, no gimmicks, just calm him. If you succeed, the money is yours." His voice was steady, but behind the words was a man desperate for a miracle. The challenge sent shockwaves through social media and the dog training community. Trainers flew in from all over the world, eager to claim the prize and make their name. Television crews camped outside the estate, waiting to see if anyone could tame the untamable dog. Yet one by one they failed. Within minutes, Titan would roar, snap, or charge, forcing them to retreat with bruises and broken confidence. Charles watched each failure with a mix of frustration and sorrow. His hope dimmed with every attempt. Why would anyone want to help him? One trainer scoffed, "That dog is broken beyond repair." But Charles knew better. He saw in Titan's eyes a sadness that mirrored his own. Titan wasn't dangerous. He was grieving. On the outside, the world saw a billionaire's folly. Inside, Charles's heart broke with every growl, every snap, every rejection. The announcement remained live on Charles's foundation website, a beacon of hope and challenge. "If you can calm my dog, I will reward you," the site read simply. Little did Charles know, the person who would accept that challenge and change everything was not a famous trainer or celebrity, but a quiet 9-year-old girl named Emma, who saw beyond Titan's snarls to the pain beneath. When Charles Whittaker's announcement hit the headlines, it ignited a firestorm of attention. The idea of a billionaire offering $1 million to anyone who could calm a savage dog was too tempting to ignore. The story traveled fast, not just in the elite circles of dog trainers and animal behaviorists, but also in the ordinary corners of the world. News outlets ran sensational headlines. $1 million challenge to tame Titan, the untouchable dog, billionaire's last hope for his fearsome dog, and can anyone calm the beast? Social media exploded with opinions, memes, and wild guesses about whether anyone could succeed. In cities across the country, trainers prepared to fly to Charles' estate, eager to take on the challenge. High-profile animal experts filmed promotional videos, promising their expertise would tame the dog. Yet beneath the bravado, many doubted the story's truth, calling it a publicity stunt or a billionaire's desperate fantasy. But for most people, Titan was just a headline, another celebrity news story they'd forget in days. For the people in a small, quiet town an hour away, though, the story felt different. It felt personal. Rachel Jensen was a single mother juggling 2 jobs and raising her 9-year-old daughter, Emma. Rachel's days were a constant blur of school drop-offs, work shifts, and bedtime stories. Emma was no ordinary child. Diagnosed with autism at a young age, Emma rarely spoke to strangers and found comfort in quiet routines and gentle animals. At home, she was different, joyful, curious, and deeply connected to the world around her. One evening, Rachel was preparing dinner when Emma wandered into the kitchen, eyes wide, holding a tablet. On the screen was a video about Titan, the aggressive dog no one could calm. Emma's gaze fixed on the image of the snarling German Shepherd. Then she turned to her mother and asked softly, "Do you think I could help the dog?" Rachel nearly dropped the spoon. Emma rarely initiated conversation with new topics. She usually kept to herself, avoiding crowds and noise. But this was different. There was a quiet confidence in Emma's voice Rachel had never heard before. "Sweetheart," Rachel said gently, "that dog is very dangerous. Even grown trainers can't calm him. I don't want you to get hurt." Emma's eyes didn't waver. "I'm not scared. I want to try." Rachel felt a mixture of pride and fear. Could Emma really help where so many adults had failed? Emma's connection to animals was extraordinary. Neighborhood dogs often gathered around her, sensing something special. Even birds would land on her hands, trusting her in a way they never had with others. The next day, Rachel told a close friend about Emma's interest in the challenge. "She has this way with animals," Rachel said. "Maybe this is her chance." Word spread quietly among their community. Local teachers, neighbors, and even a few small-town reporters began to follow Emma's story with curiosity and hope. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Charles Whittaker was growing more guarded. The parade of trainers had ended in failure, and the media's attention was shifting from excitement to mockery. Rumors circulated that Titan was untrainable, that Charles had lost his mind, or worse, that he was hiding some dark secret behind the dog's aggression. One afternoon, Charles sat in his study, scrolling through emails and news reports. Among the messages was an unexpected email from Rachel Jensen. It was simple and direct. "My daughter Emma would like to try calming Titan. She is different, autistic, but she has a unique way with animals. We understand the risks and would like to help." Charles paused, staring at the screen. After months of disappointment, could this quiet little girl from a small town be the answer? He asked his assistant to arrange a meeting. The estate's gates opened to Rachel and Emma a few days later, and cameras were there to capture the moment. The world waited to see if anyone could tame the untamable dog. But Charles's focus was not on the cameras or the headlines. It was on the small girl who might hold the key to healing a broken dog and a broken man. Emma Jensen was unlike most children. At 9 years old, she lived in a world that sometimes felt overwhelming and confusing. Sounds that others barely noticed, the hum of a vacuum, the clang of dishes, the chatter of a crowded room, could overload her senses. Crowds and bright lights made her anxious. She rarely spoke with strangers, often communicating through drawings or simple gestures instead. Yet with animals, Emma was different. She had a special gift, a quiet understanding that went beyond words. At home, stray cats would curl up on her lap. Neighborhood dogs would follow her on walks, wagging their tails with trust. Even birds perched on her windowsill, as if drawn by her calm energy. Rachel watched her daughter closely. She knew Emma's world was unique, but she also saw the strength and kindness within her. When Emma had asked to help Titan, Rachel's heart had tightened with both worry and hope. Could her daughter face a fierce, aggressive dog and somehow reach in where others could not? The day arrived when Rachel and Emma pulled up the winding driveway to the Whittaker estate. The mansion loomed large and imposing, surrounded by manicured lawns, and guarded by towering gates. Reporters and cameras waited, their lenses capturing every moment. Emma wore her signature noise-canceling headphones and clutched a small stuffed dog in one hand, a notebook in the other. Her face was calm but serious. Rachel held her hand gently, giving her a reassuring squeeze. Charles Whittaker met them at the entrance, his tall figure casting a long shadow. His eyes were tired but curious. He had seen dozens of people fail before, and part of him doubted this quiet girl would be any different. Yet something in Emma's steady gaze gave him pause. Inside the mansion, the tension was palpable. Titan's enclosure was a glass room that allowed visibility, but kept the dog safely contained. Titan was pacing restlessly, growling low and baring his teeth. Charles warned Emma softly, "Titan hasn't trusted anyone since Claire passed. He's been through a lot." Emma didn't reply with words. Instead, she slowly approached the glass, sitting cross-legged on the polished floor, her eyes lowered to avoid direct contact. She hummed a soft tune, a melody she often used to calm herself. The room fell silent. Even the staff stopped to watch. Titan growled, a deep, menacing sound. But he didn't charge or bark. Instead, his pacing slowed. He tilted his head slightly, listening to the unfamiliar but gentle hum. Emma pulled out her notebook and began drawing, simple lines, shapes, and pictures of dogs and people. She placed the drawings near the glass, as if sharing a secret message. Rachel watched her daughter, heart pounding. She had never seen Emma so focused and calm. The tension in the room began to shift. Charles leaned forward, whispering, "What is she doing?" Emma didn't answer. She kept humming, drawing, and sitting quietly. Minutes stretched into an hour. Slowly, Titan lay down, his eyes fixed on the girl who refused to meet his gaze but showed no fear. Finally, Emma stood and extended a hand, not to touch, but to offer peace. Titan pressed his nose against the glass, as if understanding. The staff gasped. Charles's eyes filled with tears. Rachel stepped forward, whispering to Charles, "Emma feels his sadness. She knows he needs more than commands or treats. He needs love." Charles nodded slowly. For the first time in months, hope flickered in his heart. Charles Whittaker had always been a man of logic and control. Decisions, calculations, and facts guided his every move. Yet, as he watched the small girl sitting quietly by Titan's enclosure, a growing doubt stirred in his mind. Could this fragile, autistic child really be the miracle he'd been searching for? Could she reach a dog that no expert, no trainer, no professional had come close to calming? For years, Charles had fought a private battle, not just with Titan's aggression, but with his own grief and guilt over Claire's death. Titan's behavior was a painful reminder of what he'd lost. The dog's snarls echoed the anger and sadness Charles buried deep inside. Emma's gentle humming filled the room as she sat cross-legged near the glass. The dog's pacing slowed. The growls quieted. She didn't speak or make sudden moves, just hummed, drew pictures, and held a small stuffed dog close. Charles paced behind the thick glass, his mind racing. He'd spent millions on treatments, therapies, and trainers. But this was different. This was no ordinary training. After nearly an hour, Emma slowly stood and held out her hand, not to touch Titan, but as an offering of peace. Titan hesitated, then pressed his cold nose against the glass. Charles's breath caught. The dog's amber eyes softened, filled with something raw and vulnerable. A lump rose in Charles's throat. "How?" he whispered. Rachel Jensen stepped forward. Emma senses his pain. She understands that Titan is not angry. He's grieving. He lost his person. Charles stared at the dog who had been his wife's constant companion. Claire's absence weighed on all of them. Titan wasn't just a dog. He was mourning. That evening, Charles sat alone in his study, replaying the day's events. Emma's quiet strength and gentle presence had broken through walls no one else could. He felt a flicker of hope, but also a pang of disbelief. Could such innocence and calm truly tame the untamable? As days passed, Emma returned to the estate. She didn't rush or demand. She didn't try to control Titan. Instead, she sat quietly, humming and drawing, letting the dog approach her in his own time. Slowly, Titan's growls lessened. He stopped pacing and began to observe Emma with cautious curiosity. Charles found himself drawn to the sessions. For the first time in months, he wasn't consumed by his grief or frustration. Watching Emma work with Titan showed him the power of patience and empathy. One afternoon, as Emma gently reached through a small opening in the glass enclosure, Titan sniffed her fingers and allowed the softest touch. The moment was electric, an unspoken connection that brought tears to Charles's eyes. He realized something profound. Emma was teaching him too, not just about dogs, but about healing, acceptance, and the quiet power of kindness. News of Emma's progress spread quietly. Staff who once doubted were now believers. Charles began inviting Emma to stay longer, to come more often. He even started to open up, sharing stories of Claire and Titan, admitting his own loneliness and pain. Emma didn't speak much, but her actions spoke volumes. She had become the bridge between a broken dog and a broken man. Yet, challenges remained. Titan's past traumas could not be erased overnight. Charles knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain. But with Emma by their side, a fragile hope took root, a hope that healing was possible, even for the most wounded hearts. Days turned into weeks as Emma continued her quiet visits to the Whittaker estate. The media frenzy had calmed somewhat, the initial buzz of the $1 million challenge fading into whispers of curiosity about the little girl who might actually succeed where professionals had failed. Emma didn't see herself as a hero. To her, calming Titan wasn't about money or fame. It was about connection, understanding, and love. She didn't speak much, but her presence radiated a calm that began to fill the house like a gentle wave. Titan, once a snarling beast behind glass, was slowly transforming. His eyes grew less wild, his movements less frantic. Emma's routine was simple but powerful. She would arrive, remove her headphones, and sit quietly near the enclosure. She hummed soft melodies, she learned to soothe herself and drew pictures of dogs, trees, and happy faces, placing them carefully within Titan's sight. One afternoon, Rachel stood by the grand window overlooking the estate's gardens, watching Emma and Charles interact. The tension between the billionaire and the little girl had shifted into something warmer, more genuine. Charles had started to ask questions, not about business or technology, but about Emma's world, her routines, and the way she seemed to communicate without words. "You don't have to explain," Emma said softly one day. "But if you want, I can draw it for you." Charles smiled, a rare, genuine smile that had been absent for months. On that day, Emma took a bold step. Instead of sitting by the glass, she quietly approached the small door that led to Titan's enclosure. Charles's heart pounded. He hadn't allowed anyone that close since the first trainers had tried and failed. Emma knelt beside the door and placed her hand gently on the cool metal. Titan's eyes met hers. The dog hesitated, then slowly stepped forward, his massive frame calm for the first time in months. With trembling hands, Emma reached through the opening and touched Titan's thick fur. The dog didn't flinch or growl. Instead, he leaned into the touch, his breathing slowing. The staff watching from behind the glass held their breath. The moment felt sacred, a fragile bridge of trust being built. Charles wiped a tear from his cheek. This was more than he had dared to hope for. Emma's success wasn't magic. It was patience, empathy, and a deep understanding of silence. Titan's transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional. The dog that had once been locked away in isolation was beginning to heal. But the journey wasn't without challenges. Titan still had moments of fear and aggression, triggered by sudden noises or unfamiliar faces. Emma remained steady, never pushing too hard, always letting Titan set the pace. Charles's world began to change as well. He started opening the mansion's doors to Emma and her mother, inviting them for meals and walks in the gardens. For the first time since Claire's death, laughter echoed through the halls. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Charles found himself sitting beside Emma on the patio. They watched Titan play with a ball, his tail wagging gently. "I never believed a child could do what so many adults could not," Charles admitted quietly. Emma smiled shyly. Sometimes you just have to listen. Charles nodded, understanding now that healing came from the quietest places, the spaces between words, the pauses filled with patience. The billionaire's challenge was no longer about money or fame. It was about hope, connection, and the simple truth that even the most broken souls could be mended with kindness. As weeks passed, the fragile trust between Emma and Titan deepened into an unbreakable bond. What once seemed impossible was now unfolding quietly, but powerfully within the walls of the Whittaker estate. Titan, the dog who had once snarled and snapped at every shadow, was beginning to follow Emma's lead. Where before he paced in endless circles, now he lay calmly at her feet, his eyes soft and alert. The huge dog, a symbol of untamed wildness and grief, was learning to trust again. Charles Whittaker watched all of this with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The billionaire, a man who controlled entire corporations with a flick of his hand, found himself humbled by the quiet presence of a child and her dog. Emma didn't speak much, but she communicated volumes through her actions. She seemed to understand Titan's moods and fears intuitively. When the dog stiffened at a sudden noise, Emma would pause, hum softly, and extend a gentle hand. Titan responded not out of obedience, but out of trust. One crisp autumn afternoon, Charles invited Emma and Rachel to join him for a walk around the estate grounds. It was a first, the billionaire stepping out of his formal, guarded world into the fresh air with two guests who had touched his life profoundly. Emma carried her notebook, where she'd been drawing pictures of Titan's progress, simple sketches of a dog and a girl side by side, surrounded by trees and sunshine. She shyly showed her drawings to Charles, who smiled warmly. "You have a gift, Emma," he said, "not just for calming Titan, but for seeing the world differently." Emma looked down but nodded, the usual barrier of silence slowly lifting. That day, something shifted between Charles and Emma. The businessman who had spent years suppressing his grief found himself opening up in small ways, sharing memories of Claire, laughing softly at Emma's quiet humor, and even admitting his fears about moving forward without her. Emma listened, not with words, but with a stillness that spoke louder than anything Charles had heard in years. As the sun dipped low, Charles knelt beside Titan and Emma. He watched as Emma gently brushed the dog's fur, whispering a melody only Titan seemed to understand. The media had long since lost interest in the challenge. The $1 million prize was still unclaimed, but Charles no longer cared about the money. The prize, he realized, was something far more valuable, a chance to heal a broken family. But outside the estate, whispers and questions remained. Would the world accept this quiet miracle? Could a billionaire and a little autistic girl truly overcome grief and fear together? Emma didn't answer with words, but her eyes held the promise of hope, a promise that sometimes the smallest voices have the greatest power. And Titan, once untouchable and feared, was proof that even the most wounded hearts could learn to trust again. News of the quiet transformation at the Whittaker estate began to ripple beyond the mansion's walls. Though the initial media frenzy over the $1 million challenge had died down, the story of the autistic girl calming the fierce dog slowly found its way back into the public eye. It started with a local newspaper article, an intimate profile on Emma Jensen and her unique gift. The piece described how Emma, with her gentle presence and unwavering patience, had broken through the barriers that years of trauma had built around Titan's heart. From there, the story blossomed into something much bigger. Charles Whittaker, a man usually cautious about publicity, agreed to share parts of Emma's journey, not for fame or profit, but to inspire others. A video was released showing the moment Titan allowed Emma to touch him for the first time, the dog's eyes softening as he leaned into her hand. Viewers around the world were captivated. Comments poured in from parents of autistic children, dog lovers, and people who had faced their own struggles with trauma and loss. Emma became a quiet symbol of hope, a reminder that understanding and kindness could change lives. Meanwhile, Charles found himself fielding interviews, not about his business empire or his wealth, but about the healing power of empathy and patience. Despite the renewed attention, Emma remained unchanged. She was still the quiet girl who spoke mostly through her drawings and actions, but those who met her sensed a profound strength beneath her calm exterior. At the estate, the routine continued. Emma arrived daily, humming her melodies and drawing pictures for Titan. The dog, once a creature of fear and anger, now greeted her with gentle tail wags and relaxed posture. Charles watched the transformation with awe. For the first time in years, the estate felt alive with warmth and laughter. He found himself joining Emma and Rachel on walks, sharing stories, and learning to let go of the past. One afternoon, a reporter asked Charles if the $1 million reward would be given to Emma. Charles smiled, his eyes filled with gratitude. Emma's gift can't be measured in money. The true reward is seeing a broken dog and a broken man healed together. The story inspired many. Animal shelters reported increased adoptions of anxious or aggressive dogs as people realized that with patience and understanding, healing was possible. Parents of autistic children shared stories of newfound confidence and connection. But for Emma, the greatest reward was simpler: being accepted, understood, and loved. Her journey had begun with a quiet wish to help a scared dog. It had grown into something much bigger, a testament to the power of empathy and a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices can make the loudest impact. Months after Emma's quiet triumph at the Whittaker estate, life had changed for Emma, for Charles, and for Titan in ways no one could have predicted. The once aggressive dog had blossomed into a calm and loyal companion. Titan followed Emma wherever she went, his amber eyes now filled with trust and affection. No longer confined behind glass, he roamed freely in the expansive gardens, his tail wagging as he played with Emma, and even joined Charles on morning walks. Charles Whittaker, once a man trapped by grief and control, had found new purpose. Watching Emma's gentle care had taught him lessons no business deal ever could, lessons about patience, compassion, and the true meaning of strength. One bright morning, Charles invited Emma and her mother to the grand hall of his mansion. The staff and a small group of close friends gathered as Charles made an announcement that surprised everyone. "Today," he said, his voice steady and warm, "I want to thank Emma for teaching me the greatest lesson of all, that healing isn't about force or money, but about kindness and understanding. Emma, you don't need to compete for my reward. You have already given me a gift beyond measure." With a smile, Charles handed Emma a check, not for the $1 million he had promised, but for $5 million. The extra was a fund he was creating to support autistic children and programs that help families connect with animals for healing and therapy. Emma's eyes widened in surprise, but she only nodded softly. She didn't need the money. The real reward was the bond she had formed with Titan and the family she had helped mend. In the weeks that followed, Emma's story continued to inspire countless people. Charles used his influence to launch initiatives promoting autism awareness and animal therapy, dedicating resources to communities where help was most needed. Emma herself began visiting schools and therapy centers, not as a celebrity, but as a quiet symbol of hope and resilience. Though she still rarely spoke, her presence alone gave courage to others facing their own struggles. As for Titan, he became the estate's gentle guardian, a living testament to the power of love and patience. His once ferocious bark was now reserved only for welcoming friends. One evening, as the sun set behind the estate's rolling hills, Charles, Rachel, Emma, and Titan sat together on the porch. The air was filled with a peaceful stillness that spoke of healing and new beginnings. Charles looked at Emma and said, "You've changed my life in ways I never imagined." Emma smiled, her quiet eyes shining with a calm certainty. In that moment, it was clear that this was not an ending, but a beginning of a future filled with understanding, hope, and the kind of love that could calm even the fiercest storm.